Your Creative Push, episode 149.
Just look 10, 20, 30 years down the line and look back on the moment you're in now and say, will I regret not going for this?
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Jake Heilbrunn. Jake is a 19-year-old writer who just published his first book, Off the Beaten Trail, a true story about his journey, dropping out of college at 18 and solo backpacking through Central America with no phone or knowledge of Spanish. And Jake, first of all, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show today. I was wondering, could you start up by telling us a little bit about, how you went down this path?
Hey, yeah, thank you for having me on. My journey all started 3 days after I arrived at college for my first semester. I broke out in hives all over my legs and arms, and it was really uncomfortable and painful, and I didn't know what was going on. And almost the rest of the entire semester, like almost every day, I was breaking out in these rashes and hives, and I saw doctors, immunologists, dermatologists. None of them knew what was wrong, so they gave me all these pills and creams, and nothing worked. And during this time, I became pretty unhappy. I was really anxious all the time, and I started really thinking about my life. I sort of went through this like existential crisis at 18. And I realized that I was just going down a path, no intention. I was just kind of going on the path that was prescribed for me, never really thought consciously about what I wanted to do with my life. And I realized like my true desire was always to explore different ways of life. It's something I wanted to do, after high school, but I didn't do it. And so I took a leap of faith after the first semester, took a leave from school, and I hopped on a one-way flight to Guatemala and spent 4 months, teaching English in this rural town. I made my way through Central America with just a backpack, no phone, just exploring different ways of life.
Dude, that's so cool. I think a lot of people listening probably have that same kind of thing where, they probably later though find themselves like, what am I doing? Like, why have I just kind of done that? So congratulations to you for kind of figuring that out from the jump, I guess.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, at the time I was not happy with the skin condition, but now with the perspective looking back, it was sort of a blessing in disguise because it made me really think about what do I actually want to do.
Absolutely. And so what came of the skin disease?
Well, the doctors diagnosed me with chronic urticaria, which is like another name for, hey, your skin's freaking out and we don't know why. So we're going to give you this name. But so when I got home from school, I didn't leave for 2 months, and I saw this holistic doctor who said, stop eating gluten, soy, dairy. And, I did those things and it really helped. But at the end of the day, it was really just like this stress, which was really frustrating. And oddly, it's really started cooling down about a week before I left. So the synchronicity seemed to work out pretty well.
Oh, man. I love synchronicities. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your journey then, starting out.
Yeah, my journey started in this small town about 9 hours north from Guatemala City. I don't know if you've heard of Workaway. It's basically like this work travel exchange, kind of like woofing, but for anything.
Oh, cool.
And the reason that appealed to me was because I didn't want any structure. I wanted to kind of experience life on my own. I wanted to kind of like test the world, see what it was all about. And I found this guy. He was an ex-hostage raid and recovery military vet living in this rural town. No English speakers other than him and a couple volunteers. And he said, whatever your skill set may be, the people of Peten need your help. And so I reached out to him. I said, I'm 18. I have no professional skills, but I would love to be able to teach English and soccer and make a difference in any way I can. And he said, cruise on over. So I spent 6 weeks in this town living with this local family and the volunteers and teaching English, which was absolutely amazing.
Wow, that's awesome. And from there, you just kind of kept staying there?
Yeah, I stayed there for about 6 weeks. And the cool thing was for 2 of those weeks, the guy, the host, the way he made money was he would take tourists on these jungle treks through the ancient Mayan ruins, like deep in the jungle. So 2 of my 6 weeks were spent trekking in the jungle, which was one of the coolest things. I mean, getting to see these ancient Mayan civilizations. A lot of them aren't even excavated because they're so far. And that was just like to see these structures that were built like thousands of years ago. And like there's almost no people who visit this because it's so far in, and I had the opportunity to do so. It was just mind-boggling, and I'd never been without my phone, and so here I am, and I dive right into the deep end, and there's no electricity for all this time. So it was pretty, it definitely shifted my perspective.
Absolutely, dude. You've experienced something that I think a lot of people wish they could have. So let's talk a little bit about the process of writing the book. So when you got back, you just decided that this is something that needs to be like documented?
Yeah, I've always loved writing, and I brought a journal with me, kind of had the idea of possibly writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
But, as I made my way through and, journaling almost every day, I hit one moment where I knew I was going to write a book. Like the vision was clear in my head. And so the day after I returned, about 4 months out, the 4-month journey, literally the next day I started writing the book. I had no idea how, but I got into this pretty serious writing routine where I would wake up, take a cold shower right away, do like a 10-minute just like mindfulness meditation to like music on YouTube. And I would get my coffee and I would just start writing, and I would write for about 4 hours every day for about 3 months. And then that's how I got the first draft. And that was basically the gist of my writing routine. It was a bit crazy for those 3 months.
I bet. Were there any days of writer's block, or was it just like from the jump to the end, you just kind of just went?
Oh, absolute writer's block. I mean, I think it's impossible. I mean, I've read a lot about other writers and how to do it. And it is just part, like you can't avoid it. But I watched this video, and it made a lot of sense about how to overcome writer's block. What he said was just allow yourself to write complete garbage, because we get this block because we think we can't write because the quality will be pretty bad. And so I would just let myself write, garbage, I guess you could call it that. But a lot of the time it wasn't garbage, and I could always go back and, reword things and sharpen it up. So I found that really effective.
Yeah, man. I find that to be very useful too, is just like, be just totally willing to, nobody has to see this version of what I'm writing right now. And it's just like putting it, like you said, just garbage onto the page, so that you can actually just output stuff. And from the garbage, sometimes there's some absolute gold, involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is, a lot of the time it's not garbage.
Exactly. Yeah. We're our own like worst critics. So it's just about, like you said, just doing it every day and just taking, I like the idea of taking a cold shower and then just like, 10 minutes to yourself and then just going for it until you kind of can't anymore.
Yeah. I learned that from the Tony Robbins. He jumps in a cold pool, but it's kind of like starting your day doing something uncomfortable because, the writing block is uncomfortable. And so I found that it was not only woke me up, early in the morning physically and mentally, but it was kind of like starting my day doing something I didn't want to do, which would prepare me for the next thing I didn't want to do.
Well, congratulations. And I read it's 100,000 words. The
first draft was 106,000 words, yeah.
Wow.
I dwindled it down to 90,000. It's a 300-page book.
Oh, wow. And in just 3 months, that's pretty impressive.
The first draft.
Yeah. Like, so what was it like then dwindling it down, as you said? Like, did you have to like go through and look for the garbage and take it out? Was that hard, like a hard process for you?
Personally, I found that part very difficult. I mean, there's this saying in writing, you have to kill your own darling sometimes, which is like you get like this attachment to you write. You think it's gold. And
right.
So first, I just took like 2 weeks, didn't touch it, and then read it again. Then I had my mom and sister read it, and my dad. And then I had a teacher from high school. She was an AP English teacher, read it. And then I got a professional editor. And then I had 2 different groups of beta readers. And in those 2 groups, I had another teacher and someone who edits documents for a living. So we went through so many different edits.
Oh, wow. So where did you like kind of learn, like how did you learn how to do this process? Because it sounds like you had it down. Like, once the book was down, it sounds like you had the editing process good to go.
Yeah, I did a lot of research at first. And then after I wrote the manuscript, I ended up joining this, it's like a membership to this thing called Quantum Leap, which is like learning how to write the book, how to market, how to edit, do all these different steps because I'm at a point where I don't see myself going back to a traditional university, and I know, my calling is writing and doing more of this. And this program has all these tools and coaches who can help you learn how to market yourself and then how to do each step of the process. So it's almost like a business, which I never expected because I've outsourced each step of the way to like a professional freelancer.
Wow. And so Quantum Leap it is?
Yeah.
QuantumLeap.com?
It's called Quantum Leap, yes.
So pretty much anybody who has a unique story or has always kind of wanted to write a book can kind of go there to figure that out.
Yeah, and it's great because, I mean, a lot of creatives have these incredible stories and artistic pieces, but, I never thought of this, like a business. I just wanted to get my story to the world. And after a lot of the research I did, it's like, you kind of have to do these things. And that was like important for me to learn how to, do this process and understand how it works.
Very cool. Now, you said you've always enjoyed writing and you always loved writing. Can you take us back to like one of your first memories?
Yeah. I mean, even as a little kid, I had the chance to go to England on a soccer trip when I was like 10 years old. And I remember I kept a journal there. I was living with a host family there. And I just remember years later, like being able to go back and bring myself back to the memories and the vivid descriptions. Like, it's just so powerful, and it's always something I enjoyed. I was never like really the best writer in my classes, but it was the only class in middle school and high school where I was in the kind of advanced class. I was never good at science or math, but writing just kind of called out to me, being able to articulate words and ideas into a story. And when I went to college, I kind of was like bought into the idea that I could never be a writer. I have to focus on something else. But, I love it. And I've, now committed, with a blog I have as well. And the book, I just want to write and write and write.
Once you were finished writing the book, did you, and editing, I know you're in like kind of the, I guess, publicity phase of it now?
Yes, just started.
Yeah. Have you found yourself like craving writing, or have you been doing any more writing since then?
Yeah, I actually have a weekly blog. So every Wednesday I haven't missed a week since almost a year now. So I started that, A, because I love it, and B, I want to keep up with my craft. And, it gets, with so many things going on, it gets busy, but I've made a commitment that every Wednesday doing that, and that kind of allows me to get to, do those 2-3 hours a week where I get to get into the zone where, time flies by and you're just in the zone writing, which I love. And for blog posts and some articles, I'll probably start writing soon for the launch. So I'm excited about that.
Very cool. Yeah, I was literally just talking to my wife about this last night. It was like the podcast has kind of taken over my life. It's a good thing. And consistency is one of those things that we talked about. It's just like, especially for podcasting, and once you build an audience, you have people that are looking for it. So you kind of feel loyal to them to do it. So like it becomes not necessarily a job, but it's so important to have that consistency to do it once a week or whatever you kind of tell people that you'll be there. You have to show up. But I've been missing out on writing, and this weekend I'm just planning on writing all weekend long.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, because it's like a need,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really great way to like express yourself. I mean, for people who love it or whatever your craft is, it's really, to me, it's like a form of like meditation. I mean, you lose track of everything except what you're into. And I think that's one of the greatest feelings ever.
Absolutely. It's like therapy.
Yeah.
And I never know what I really actually think about a topic until I write about it.
Oh, yeah. I love that quote. It's like, I don't know what I think until I write.
Yeah. It's like the best therapy I think that there is.
Agreed.
So you talked a little bit about writer's block. Are there any other kind of resistances that you experience?
I think putting yourself out there always is. Once I send the first pitch, or if I'm recently I reached out to a newspaper at the Union Tribune, and I'm always like, whenever I reach out to someone, it's kind of like the doubt, like, what if they just like get mad at me or something? But I found that like just sending, the way I overcome it, I guess, is like, okay, be genuine, like be myself. Don't write anything that I wouldn't be, that I would be upset that they would react to. Like if I understand, okay, I'm okay with how they respond because this is as my genuine self writing this, then I'm okay. And whatever happens after that happens. But I always think, I try and imagine myself like in 10 years or even in like 6 months after the book launch, like, will I regret not going for this just because I was scared to ask? And the question is always, of course, I'll regret it. So I find when I ask myself that, it pushes me to just go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking about this the other day too. It's, taking those Hail Marys, like, and it doesn't even have to be a Hail Mary, but putting yourself out there is sometimes difficult. But the worst that can happen is they just say no, or they just ignore you. And like, so what? Like you said, you did take that shot and then you won't regret it later.
Yeah, agreed.
Now, I read that you got your book to, a few interesting people like Drew Brees and Jack Canfield. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the Drew Brees story was pretty funny. So for months, I live in San Diego, and I know he lives in San Diego because I had a friend who used to live in his neighborhood. And for months, I imagined myself getting this book to Drew. And maybe a month and a half ago, I had two things to do this day. And one of them was go to the post office or something. And the second was I was going to give my book to Drew Brees. And I knew where he lived, but I had no idea how I would get it to him. And I'm at the stop sign in Del Mar, the town he lives, where I would have to go straight to go to the post office or go left to go to Drew's. And of course, I planned on doing Drew's second because I wanted to procrastinate the fearful task. But something, a gut decision, literally 10 seconds before the stop sign said, Jake, go left. And so I swing left, and then I park a street away from his house. And then I'm sitting in his car, these ideas sound great in your head, but then you get there and I'm like, what am I doing? What if he thinks I'm some stalker? What if he gets pissed? What if he probably has a gate? He's an NFL quarterback. So I'm kind of getting the doubt, letting the fear sit in. And then I had actually been listening to a podcast on the School of Greatness. And,
cool, yeah.
And I heard this quote by Theodore Roosevelt, and it said, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing you can do is the wrong thing, and the worst thing you can do is nothing. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, you know what? I got to do something. I'm here. And so I get up and I walk to his house, and right as I notice that he has a gate with a code, of course he does, the garage door opens and out walks Drew Brees. It was I could not have imagined a better situation. And I kind of waved to him I was approaching his driveway. So he knew I was kind of coming up to his house. And then I just introduced myself, shared my pitch, and I had written a personal letter with an endorsement request in the book. And I just told him why I respected him. He's done a lot through the Drew Brees Foundation and philanthropic stuff, which I think is super cool. So I just told him that, and he was like, that's so cool, Jake. Well, thanks for giving this to me, and have a great day. And then he got in his car and drove off. So that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, man, it's always that you got to listen to that voice that tells you, Jake, go left, or whatever going left means. And it's sometimes really hard. It's like approaching a girl and asking her to dance at a dance. That's what that's what the fear that I get whenever I think about that. But it's sometimes so scary, but you have to go for it, especially if you have this thing that you believe in. To get other people on board, it's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is, something like that took a lot of effort, whereas one day I had the same gut feeling sitting at a coffee shop. It was Friday, 5 p.m., and Chris Guillebeau, his book, The Art of Nonconformity, is one of my favorite books, and I love his blog. And I sent him a cold pitch on his contact page, and he responded in 5 minutes, said, I get 50 requests a month to review books, but I might make an exception for you, send it over. And now on my back cover is this endorsement from Chris, and he read the book and really liked it. So it's crazy just by, putting yourself out there, whatever way, whether that's going up to someone's door or sending a pitch, you never know what could happen.
And you just kind of have to ask first and worry about that feeling of, okay, I'm here. What now?
Yeah, exactly.
You just worry about that later, and it's just going for it almost blindly.
It's like taking that first step when you can't see the whole staircase, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also highly recommend School of Greatness. It's one of my favorite podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, do you have a best or a worst creative moment?
A best or worst creative moment? I think my best creative moment is usually when I get, I don't know if it would be one best, but usually when I get these sparks of an idea, I could be either drinking coffee or on a run or something. I will stop whatever I'm doing and write it down. I guess I could say one would be, I was actually reading Wild by Cheryl Strayed. It's a lot of people joke who've read my book and say it's the young dude version of mine. But I read this book of hers, and it just sparked this idea for me. And I went back and I added this part to my book. That's, pretty, a vulnerable part of my story, but her book is so raw and authentic. And I was wow, I really should share this kind of not so great moment in my life. And so I did, and I think that adds a lot to the story. So for me, I think that would be one of the best creative moments. And in terms of worst creative moments, I love the creative part, but like I said, there are some days where it just does not flow. And I can't think of one day in particular on the creative side, because I love the creative side, but writer's block. But I guess on more of the logistics distribution side for the book stuff, those moments can suck.
And I love what you said about, being vulnerable and putting yourself out there. And I love how that's one of your best moments, because it's one of, like we were talking about before, it's, putting yourself out there. It's so hard sometimes to be vulnerable and to be raw, because you wonder, what are people going to think? And am I really just like going naked in front of everyone right now, essentially? But it's like, it's so important to do. And that's when people can relate so much to those personal stories.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think seeing her vulnerability, Cheryl Strayed's vulnerability, kind of inspired me to go to that next level, which was really cool.
Absolutely. And who knows who you're going to inspire to go to that next level as well.
Yeah, I hope a lot of people.
That's the goal, man.
Yeah.
I was wondering, do you have like a greatest inspiration or a favorite book or YouTube clip or anything else that you draw inspiration from?
I love books. I'm a huge reader, and there's been a couple of great books that I think I've read. In terms of like my story, I thought Wild was great because it was so similar. One of my favorite books is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's kind of about, it's really like, depressing. He went through the Holocaust and, went through like the worst possible experiences a human can go through. But he talked about, how we can find meaning even through suffering. And that book kind of like really inspired my stoic mindset because, thank goodness I'm not going through anything as near as bad as he had to. But like seeing that even if I did, like there's always ways to find meaning in our life. Like that's always inspires me to whatever I'm going through, kind of, flip and ask, like, how is life happening for me? Like, how can I find the meaning in this, even if it's not what I would label as something great? So I found that to be really, really inspirational for me.
Very cool. And we'll have that linked up at the show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/Jake Heilbrunn. And Jake, it's time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've really inspired. Just give them your best words of advice and really push them to pursue their creative passions.
My best words of advice would be just follow your gut, intuition, heart, whatever you wish to call it. But deep within you, you know what's best for you and what you really want to do. And once you take the leap to go pursue that, everything will fall into place. And, just look 10, 20, 30 years down the line and look back on the moment you're in now and say, will I regret not going for this? And, just try and leave it out all on the field.
Perfect advice, man. And your book comes out today, September 28th, and I just want to say congratulations to you. I'm really impressed by, you doing this at such a young age, and I can't wait to see what you come up with in the future, man.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's been a blast.
Absolutely, man. And you can find more about Jake at jakeheilbrunn.com. Our show notes page is yourcreativepush.com/Jake Heilbrunn. We will have links to get the book and links to find everything that we talked about today. So, Jake, thanks again, brother.
Thank you.
My thanks to Jake for coming on the show. A lot of lessons from a young man who has just went for it, is just doing it. And I think one of the really important lessons that he taught us today is not just when you're in a writer's block, but just in general, allowing yourself to write garbage or allowing yourself to just paint or just play music or whatever it is that you do. Don't get stuck in that mindset of, being the editor while you're writing or even before you start writing. That is a surefire way to not get anything on the page or canvas or whatever it is, because you're already being too self-critical before the thing is even out there. It's like Kent Gustafson said back in episode 38, puke it out and then polish it. It's so important to get it out there. And another important lesson is just taking shots. Just even if you're scared, even if you're, afraid to put yourself out there, just taking a chance. And this is something that's come up in a lot of the recent episodes, and I always kind of see that as a sign, that if you listened back then to another episode and started to think about a shot that you could take, a Hail Mary play, reaching out to somebody for whatever the reason is, and you keep hearing this lesson come up over and over again, it's time to do it. Just do it. Stop thinking about it and just try. The worst that can happen is no response or a no, and a no isn't that bad. So again, a huge thank you to Jake. Go check out his book. It's on sale now. You can find it on Amazon. That's Off the Beaten Trail by Jake Heilbrunn. That's HEILBRUNN, or you can head to the show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/149. But that's all I've got for you today. We will be back for you on Friday if you need the push again. It's a double episode, so you get one on Friday, one on Saturday. A little bonus action for some extra pushing if you need it this weekend. But that's all I've got. I love y'all, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.